Discord. Yeah. Jamie's come. Excellent. It's nice that we're taking some time. Beautiful. Hi, Jamie.
Hey.
Awesome. Still getting used to the setup here, man. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Great. Great. Lovely.
How's everyone else doing?
Looks like everyone's doing swell. Looks like. I was just getting into the introduction, then I realized I should be recording this session. So it says that, yeah, I am recording. Very good, very good, very good, very good. Excellent. So yeah, today we're going to do these things. We're going to, just get a quick round of intro, even if you guys want it, but I think it's nice that you hear each other a little. Then a quick overview of the course, which you all already know quite well. But the time I really want to spend today is on the state of the industry, where we are in it, a little bit about terminology and these so-called behavior design lens set, which I've developed for you. Then we'll kind of wrap up with behavioral ethics and homework and stuff like that. So it's those points 3, 4, 5 that are the key today. But we could start with this and maybe go around. I'll go from the top as I see you in the window. So Tom, could you go first?
Wow, okay, yeah, unlucky. Well, hello everybody. I'm Tom from Finland. Not Tom of Finland. So my background is originally in media technology and graphic design, and now most recently digital media design. I'm a Aalto alumni, like I guess Ashwin has some kind of connections there at least. And well, I'm a co-founder in this company called TimeSpace, and I'm kind of wearing all the design hats there. I don't know if you read my intro in the Slack, but I'm basically just reiterating that stuff, I guess. So my interest in this course is just to kind of learn a little bit more deeply about the cognitive and psychological goings on in the human brain, I guess. I'm relatively new to behavior design, so I'm pretty excited to learn what's to be learned here. And also it's nice to see some like new faces, even if it's just on a screen. Yeah, looking forward to it.
It's Philip next.
Okay, hey everyone, I'm Philip and I'm based in Copenhagen, but I work for Visit Greenland. So I'm trying to make Greenland popular in the world as a destination to visit. So you should all visit Greenland. I work here as basically head of digital, but it's mostly being a digital strategist, how we connect all the platforms and how we can get the most out of it, out of them. And yeah, my interest in the course is closely related to interest and also professionally connected to the UX. And it's been also a subject that I've been very interested in, the behavioral design. So that's a nice chance right now to dive into details in it. And I know Ashwin from before, we were both involved in a project that he facilitated, and I was impressed by his knowledge and skills. That's why I ended up here together with you guys.
We had good chemistry.
Virtually.
Welcome, Tom. Welcome, Philip.
Thanks.
It's Ines next. Sorry, it's Iris next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Iris from Taiwan, which is pretty far from all of you guys. And I'm a fresh graduate of business administration, and I used to be an exchange student in Aalto University in Finland. And that is where I met Ashwin. And I've been really interested in behavioral thing, like design, psychology thing. And that is why I would like to enroll in this course. And also because I'm from Taiwan, so it's 11 p.m. now. So allow me to look a little bit tired because it has been a long day. And
Wow.
I'm super excited to be with all of you guys to spend the rest of my Monday and also to start my Tuesday. Thank you.
Iris has a work ethic. Iris has a work ethic that's crazy. She did internship associate program project with me at Fabric. She did some really heavy taxonomy stuff in categorizing different types of behavioral signals in the funnel and stuff like that. And 1:30 a.m. no problem, good to go. So I was pretty impressed. And
Props to you for doing that. Iris.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, so we go back a bit as well. On to Sia. Welcome, Iris.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you. I want to go to Iris since I want because I'm tired of Finland and it's constant change of season here. So yeah. So shortly about me, UX UI designer by trade, but I'm currently trying to push onto service design / business design areas, a bit more like high level stuff basically. But I did find myself maybe feeling very uncomfortable here. So I'm actually trying to go down the level now again, probably back to product design. For me, these topics are very interesting because I design for users, but I also in the past have been designing for learners, and I wrote a thesis about designing a learning experience. So it was always very interesting to see how for users, everything is kind of a bit shallow. When you go into learning, everything gets more complicated and you kind of have to consider a lot more complex behaviors and a lot more complex kind of processes for the service to be used. So I'm really curious about anything that we can learn here, especially if I could build on top of what I already know, that would be amazing. And knowing that there are so many talented other designers over here, I'm just pleased. So I think it's going to be amazing to participate in this course. And obviously, nice to meet you all. Quite an international bunch here.
Yes.
All right.
Welcome, Sia. Super nice to have
Thank
you. It's on to Jamie.
Hi guys, I'm Jamie, and to add to the mix, I'm from Chicago, so we got representation of literally all across the world. And I work with Katie, and we're working on a program to help people elevate their habits, level up their life, specifically targeting entrepreneurs with ADHD. And so my interest in this course is on behavior change. This is something we're deeply focused on, which I think really is the foundation for any positive change in our lives. Sometimes they happen. Most of the time it takes, I guess always takes very effortful change to consciously decide the type of change that we want to make instead of just being unconsciously driven. So I think the more that we can design these experiences intentionally, the better outcomes that we will have.
That's brilliantly said. Totally agree.
Yeah.
And in fact, this whole tension between what we are driven to do unconsciously and what can be designed or what can be done with some sense of agency, that tension is at the very heart of this course, and we'll get into that. But super interesting. Jamie and Katie got in touch with me through CIID, the school I went to in Copenhagen, which Katie also went to some years later. And they were already working on this habit stuff. And I was talking about behavior design, and she got in touch, and we just instant love at first conversation in terms of intellectual connection was so strong that we've just been sparring ever since. And I told these guys I'm doing this product and this course, and they were like, no brainer. This is the address for the invoice. I was like, wow, amazing. So we already collaborated like a year now, and it's been super interesting what these guys are doing, and I've got to learn a lot also because of their active feedback and their work. So the other person in that duo is Katie, the last in the list today to go.
And I want to add one thing in also. My mom is from Taiwan, so all my family is in Taiwan.
Wow, it's true.
Awesome. Yeah.
Taiwan's leading the
Nice to meet you.
Asia battalion here.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Awesome. Excellent.
Yeah, I'll pipe
Hey.
in.
Hi.
Yeah, as Jamie said, we're working together on the project to help people with ADHD. And yeah, my background is also in visual design and user interfaces. And I've been freelancing and helping startups with product design for a while. And my specialty is in mostly mobile applications. And yeah, as Ashwin said, he mentioned some kind of topic on our alumni group about behavior change. And yeah, we immediately got in contact, and it's been a really interesting conversation with him because for a long time, I've been looking at user experience without this lens of behavior. And it seems like this is a really core piece of experience design. So I'm happy to learn more about it.
I should just recruit all of you guys to market for me. You guys do it so much better than I do. But it's absolutely spot on there. Great. I'm gonna have to move on. I mean, you've all got a sense of each other, and I think please reach out to each other on Slack and collaborate. That's a big reason to have you all together in this thing. So because I have a lot to go through. Yeah.
Sorry, if I add one thing, I just remembered. I didn't mention my background is in computer science.
That's
so
right.
any sort of I think it's important to toss that into the mix. That's perspective I'm coming from, as opposed to a lot of the design here. So
yeah,
I can bring some of this technical experience to the table.
That's excellent. Philippe, did you also have a technical background?
I have a marketing background, mostly focused on e-business.
Good stuff.
Very cool.
Excellent. All right. Oops. Introductions are done. Yeah. So we had some pre-course assignments. Those were just meant to warm you up and get you started thinking about these topics and just kind of go out of the superficial and start getting into the deeper, give you a sense of deeper content, what it looks like. And you basically took a personality test. We will revisit that test and also personality in the class on diversity, which comes quite late into the course. Then you listen to Magda Osman, who's actually a leading researcher who we will revisit in classes like motivation and stuff. And she's kind of unique in the field today. And she's very important from the perspective of this whole free will agency versus being manipulated, that whole debate. She's kind of critical in that. And then, yeah, I put an article out there to read, this famous one, Personal's Goals and Emotional Design. Not sure how many people had the chance to look at it, but I will refer to that a little bit in class today, or actually it's kind of pretty central to one part. Don't worry about it if you haven't, we'll revisit that, right? But the third assignment was so we could actually get into that a little bit today. Well, the core themes you've seen, I don't need to go through them. We're going to have 12 classes. I'm quite happy that each class we're going to stick to exactly what was in the deck, almost what was in the deck. So I got the overall picture quite right. We're in class 1 today. There's going to be some quizzes every week. I'll pace out some assignments, and then also this final project thing will happen. There'll also be some industry projects or industry cases. So Tom's case, Ava goals. Philippe is still thinking about it, I think, yes. And who else? Sia is still thinking about it, but Ines already knows what she wants to work on. So no worry about that. We'll figure that out, but we'll try to crack some of the cases or some behavior change problems that you have on your projects all together in class within a certain class context, so that we get everyone's brain power and alignment on some of those problems. So that's another thing that's part of the course design. And grading system, I thought I'd throw it in there for people who would prefer to be graded, but we can discuss that as well. It's an option. And it's also, this is a very qualitative course. It's terribly hard to be objectively, grading anybody on using a numerical scale, but still it's possible if you really want to. Anyways, this is just the formalities. I just wanted to warm you up on the formalities before I actually got into the program itself. Well, then we have this, of course. You've all seen the behavior design canvas. It's a tool I developed. I'll be introducing it a little bit later. Turned it into a Miro canvas that looks like this. We could use this to brainstorm, park our Post-its, capture your ideas and insights, and generally learn how to use the canvas better. So that's another piece. And then I guess we are off, ready to start. As Steve Jobs famously said, let's make history together. Okay, I'm just gonna jump in. In today's class, we created these learning modules. It's basically a different way of learning, different kind of approach to learning something. And in today's class, we have almost all the modules except for we won't be doing an experiment review. We won't be doing any thought experiments. We won't be doing any industry cases, but all the rest, we'll be looking at lectures, look at some data, homework, product review, etc. Again, it's not something that you need to master right now, but there's some good deal of variety here today. Right. So first, a little bit about where this industry is. I've read 2 good reports recently, and this is the first one. The more recent one, I haven't scanned it yet, but this is pretty good. It's a report called Behavioral Teams Around the World. And even though those numbers are only in the hundreds, as you can see, there's still some pretty good action happening all around the world. And what do they mean by behavioral teams? We'll get to that because we'll discuss behavioral and behavior, the terminology thing. But as you can see, the States seems to be leading. And then there's lots of other countries as well. India has 22, not too shabby. So actually, there's a lot more happening in India than I thought. So even though no one's like explicitly talking about behavior, I think it's kind of like this undercurrent in the industry, in technology, innovation, design, name it, just everywhere. Behavior, behavioral change, behavioral insights, different terms, but it's bubbling and it's just going to explode. It's going to be all over if it's not already. So this is a pretty interesting report. Of course, I'll share all these docs. Anything I'm referring to will be put on Slack. You'll get it there. Again, you can see the number of new behavioral science teams are starting to, that's Watson. Like Watson and Crick, that Watson. So behavioral science teams are exploding, and 2016, 2018, 2020, it's interesting why 2020 has seen lesser teams, but clearly in the last few years, the number of teams around the world have increased a lot. This is interesting. What techniques do they use? Most of these techniques are related to behavioral economics. That's exactly what we'll talk about today. Again, this difference. but it's I thought it was an interesting side. Things like social attention, incentives. We'll obviously cover all of these. Org architecture is not actually a technique; it's application context, but that's okay. And then finally, they've also talked about importance of activities. So as you can see, they're applying it in many different areas: policy change, publishing, employee behavior, marketing, products, very important, as you can see. So actually this table should be like bottom to the top, because very important, the one that's very important, the most of it is at the one with the most importance is at the bottom. So directly changing behavior outside the organizations, number one importance, sharing research internally. I think this report is useful because as you become practitioners in this field, you'll need to evangelize this, you'll need to justify, you'll need to get buy-in. And so having this kinds of data becomes very useful. So I want to jump a little bit out of what's happening in the world to this concept of the messy middle, which is being talked a lot about in human capital today. The messy middle of careers really is, I'm sorry for the graphic quality, this is not my slide, but this is the idea that basically because industries are being disrupted so much by digital, there is this middle career piece between somewhere after being, even after boot camps, but even as you start becoming a senior professional, and then from there all the way to being a VP or C-level. Yeah, exactly. Individual contributor to senior individual contributor, as it says in the bottom. That whole path is becoming really messy and it's terribly uncharted. So one of the key reasons of this course is in this emerging behavioral space globally. I mean, the course hopefully should give you the inputs you need to be able to chart your path, to be able to define your own path in this messy career middle. And I just put this here to contextualize why we are doing this. Of course, all of you also spoke about your personal reasons to come here, and that's excellent. Yeah. So then what are we, like once we decide that we want to navigate this crazy space and we want to navigate the messy middle career, we want to figure this thing out, behavior design. I want to get a little bit into how to do this and what's our approach. Let's see if my Jim Keller is here. So I've got to, oh yeah, got to play video. I'm sorry, there's something really wrong with my meeting view. I don't think this is going to play for you guys in are you able to hear the audio? That's not, no, sorry about that.
You can check audio in share screen settings. It's on the, I think, bottom left.
Exactly,
or-
that's what I've
or
got to
middle
do.
option.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think that's what I've got to do. So I've got to actually shut this off, start sharing the screen again.
So I could fill in while you're trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
I had
Thanks.
a couple of thoughts come to mind when we
Mhm.
brought up the slide about behavior, more behavior teams kind of being this undercurrent about what's going on in the world, and having just watched The Social Dilemma with Katie the other week. I don't know how many of you guys have seen it, but really, really good, really interesting talking about the current kind of landscape and the behavior. Like current landscape is kind of attention is everyone's focus, and behavior is like the natural next step of what kind of everyone wants to be able to like influence this behavior. So
Exactly. Cool. I'm gonna play this clip. We'll definitely come back and revisit the social dilemma.
So what have you learned?
learn from.
So, oh, sorry, Jamie.
It's a question from Philip. I'm not sure it was the.
Sorry, Philip, go ahead.
From me? I didn't say anything.
Okay.
Oh, was that the video then?
I think
I think
it
it
was
wa-
the
I
video.
think it was the
Okay, the
video.
video's working.
Lex sounds like Philip. So I'll show this video. I want to check if you guys can hear the audio.
Nope.
No? Wow, I actually
No.
turned on the audio. You are screen sharing. Stop share. Let's go back. Give me a sec, guys.
Maybe you could actually send the link where it starts and let us know when should we end, and then we
Human
can.
units
Now?
to the broader organization.
Exactly.
That's working.
Now I'm just getting the hang of this whole thing. Sorry. Okay, now let's watch this. Yep.
So what have you learned about the human abstractions from individual functional human units to the broader organization? What does it take to create something special?
Well, most people don't think simple enough. All right. So do you know the difference between a recipe and the understanding? There's probably a philosophical description of this. So imagine you're going to make a loaf of bread.
Yep.
The recipe says get some flour, add some water, add some yeast, mix it up, let it rise, put it in a pan, put it in the oven. It's a recipe, right? Understanding bread, you can understand biology, supply chains, grain grinders, yeast, physics, thermodynamics. Like there's so many levels of understanding there. And then when people build and design things, they frequently are executing some stack of recipes, right? And the problem with that is the recipes all have limited scope. Like if you have a really good recipe book for making bread, it won't tell you anything about how to make an omelet, right? But if you have a deep understanding of cooking, right, then bread, omelets, sandwich, there's a different, way of viewing everything. And most people, when you get to be an expert at something, you're hoping to achieve deeper understanding, not just a large set of recipes to go execute. And it's interesting to walk groups of people because executing recipes is unbelievably efficient if it's what you want to do. If it's
Yes. So I thought that podcast, that piece was super interesting because this whole idea of executing recipes is kind of what most industries tend to do when they are starting to take shape. And when you saw these few hundred behavioral teams will become a few thousand behavioral teams. And what we don't want to do, or what we want to be prepared against, is not to follow someone else's recipe or just follow a recipe that the industry is throwing out, but actually understand what is cooking. Like how do you cook up behavioral design? I just wanted to show that as a kind of really like inspiring piece of thought. All right, going to jump back. Are you able to see the presentation?
Not yet.
Wow. This is trickier than I thought. What about now?
Looks like email list or something. I don't know, some kind of list.
Oh,
We're
sorry about
seeing your
this.
burn notes.
Sorry about it, guys. That's my, yeah. Why on earth is this so complex? It's basically I'm unable to see the presentation amongst the presentations. Oh yeah, that's the one. All right, got it. Here you go. Yeah. So that was Jim Keller, and speaking about the idea of recipes. And actually, if you think about it, I mean, a lot of philosophers have spoken about the same thing, which is like, you know, it's not about filling a pot with education, but really just lighting off a fire. And I think that's the spirit we really want to bring here. Now, shown this before, and it's over 10 years that I've kind of come to this sort of list, which I think is kind of, it's a good landscape of the key things to understand about this field. If you get these, I think you start to have a really solid idea of how to proceed in this field. So the problem is that they can be something like this. It's like you begin in one subject and you open it up, you open up something called beliefs, and you see personality inside it, and you open personality and you find motivational topics in it, and you open that up, and then you come back to beliefs. So all of topics in behavioral sciences are all nested, listed, and deeply interconnected. And the idea is, how do we go from here to something like this, where you start to patch together clearly how these different topics kind of map to each other. And that's also kind of like the thinking behind the course and behind this approach, really. So now, typically what happens is in behavioral science, which is dominated by behavioral economists, such as Cassie here. Cassie Kozyrkov is not necessarily a behavioral, she's a neuroscientist. She studied neuromarketing, but she's also studied statistics. So a pretty hybrid person we've met. And studied also a PhD. She's got a double PhD, I think, one in statistics and one in psychology. Anyways, head of decision science at Google. And it's her quote, where she says, "It's through our decisions, our actions, that we affect the world around us," right? But you see what's happening here is this idea that our decisions and our actions are often the same thing, that they're interchangeable, is very popular. But actually, it doesn't work like that. For example, read this case. This is from Magda Osman's agency, a book on agency. When people's choice over their own lives is interfered with, even when it is for the greater good, it can lead to some rather bizarre behavior. Take, for instance, the switch from incandescent bulbs to fluorescent bulbs, that is energy-saving bulbs. When governments introduce regulations, they try to phase out the incandescent bulbs. And the idea behind it was that people would improve energy efficiency in the home and in the workplace. But when people were aware that the switch was coming and that CFLs were going to be made the standard, they actually reacted rather badly. According to various reports, people started stockpiling the incandescent bulbs. This was in spite of the fact that CFLs not only save energy, but also save money. So you're given a better option, it saves energy, saves money. There are clear reasons for why you should shift from one technology to the other, but people go the other direction and start stockpiling the older, worse technology. Why is that? And of course, this is the first case in the book, and the book is, it goes into this in great amounts of detail. So behavior is very complex. It's not just decision making, but a lot of the companies in the world, a lot of the professionals in the world, they just say, equate decision making and behavior. They're like, yeah, decision making and action is the same thing, just like Cassie said. So I'm not agreeing with Cassie in that previous comment. Let's see. So what happens is, for example, behavior is more than decision making. Imagine someone is made the decision to actually propose to the love of their life or whatever. in a situation like this person, this individual on the left may have made that decision to propose, but then the moment when they actually propose, the action that when that person takes that action could be could be a very different point in time. The decision has been taken, the action happens at some other point. You decide to buy a house, but when do you actually buy a house? You decide to go on vacation, when do you actually go on vacation? So decision and action are not the same thing, and behavior design tries to go deep into this, the complexity, the complex relationship between the two. Of course, we're very interested in decisions, but we're not just interested only in decisions and decision making. Same thing with Slack. I just wanted to give an example here, but I think you get the point. So when it comes to behavior, our role is primarily that of designers. That's a key thing to understand in this whole emerging industry. Hundreds of teams around the world, etc., become thousands of teams, lots of different ways to do it. Our role is essentially that of designers. We care about designing the action itself. So we get into the design part a little bit today. And you guys have probably all seen this. I just thought I'd throw up a design framework, in front of you. We care a lot about design, and in this sort of arc of stories, opportunity definition, we care about all of that, but our work as behavior designers is very much to the far right. We're trying to understand how we actually craft behavior. And a big part of that is experimentation, right? That's why both research and experimentation are deeply baked into this course. We're trying to have that parallel thread through the classes. Well, experimentation is about going into areas that we know are not going to work, or where the risk of it working is pretty high. That being able to take that risk is what experimentation is all about. But I'll get into a separate module on experimentation in class 2. Great. And before we jump into behavior design itself, I just want to wrap it up, this whole industry thing, that we need to constantly evangelize ourselves as well as our clients as, do we always change behavior? Not necessarily, not on the first day, but we bring a nuanced approach to this whole process. We see value in people's lives in totally new ways through the behavior lens, as Katie said. In fact, we are getting into the behavior lens after this, which is super interesting. And then we help teams actually, become aware that this is important. We figure out tools, and we validate hypotheses and assumptions. And then finally, we embed behavior change. I just wanted to put this list out as sort of like, it's too much on a slide, but the kind of things that behavior designers do besides the behavior change work or the design work itself, right? Great. Any questions on this industry and stuff before I get into behavior design? All right, excellent. I've got some videos for you guys, so let's save time for that. Great, let's get into some terminology and get this done with behavioral design, behavior design. We all use them interminglingly, and I don't honestly think, I'm not trying to set a particular term here, but I prefer behavior design, and there's a reason for that. So behavioral economics is oh wow, fantastic. Ines. Crazy. Hi.
Hi.
Hey, I thought you'd have that cool background like you did yesterday.
Oh, do I need to move?
That would be awesome. Yeah. Ines was in this really cool ice. Yeah, there you go. She's in Lapland with her family.
In the igloo.
In an igloo. We did a Zoom test yesterday, despite which I'm screwing around so much today. Anyways, Ines, welcome. you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ines. I'm originally from Finland, currently based in Belgium, but actually, as you see right now, currently again in Finland. I'm
Fantastic.
user-centered design is kind of the key word, but instead of user-centered design for private organizations, for products and services, I do citizen-centered design, which is for public services, for redesigning cities, for redesigning policies.
Yes. Good stuff. Ines's current project is in water behavior change around water use. I think that's such a massive topic. Like we could all make like an entire profession out of it in our lives. So we'll get into that. Welcome, Ines. I'm just going to speed forward because I wanted at least 1 hour for the content stuff. You came at exactly the right time. I got through with the industry part, what the industry looks like, where we are, very quick, just to get us on the same page. And now we're getting into what is this, the terminology of behavior design and behavioral design. See, the thing is, behavioral design is almost like become a subset of economics right now, behavioral economics. In fact, if you look at what Wikipedia says, if you type in behavioral design, it says part of a series on nudge theory. And I'm like, no, nudge theory is a part of a series on behavior design, because behavior design is vast, as I will show you today. And that's one of the reasons I think people who understand this distinction already are better positioned in the industry. And I think it's important for us as designers to understand why we use the term behavior, not behavioral. So actually, if you look at the word behavioral design, it wasn't an economist, it was a psychologist, Don Norman, who in his books, The Design of Everyday Things, which came out later, and initially in emotional design, came up with the concept of behavioral design. And it was connected to the essay that I'd sent you, the article, right? So in emotional design, Norman, who's a psychologist, but also a guy in technology, like a programmer kind of guy, and clearly leading industrial psychologist and design psychologist for our generation. He speaks about these 3 levels of design, if you will, right? The behavioral, the reflective, and the visceral. And this is what the article that I sent you talks about in a very nice way. That's a seminal article, so I've read it many times and I could read it more times. But basically Norman is saying that any designed object, and he's coming from the world of products, cars, industrial stuff. He's saying that any design has 3 kind of qualities, if you will. One is this visceral quality, which appeals to your emotions, it's just the color, the look, things that affect your senses and grab you. Then there's, on the other end, there's the reflective, which is the things that make you think about your relationship with the object, the meaning that the object gives you. That's another way design appeals to you. And in between these 2, he talked about this behavioral design, all right? And he basically, he spoke about behavioral design, and he said basically that it has to do with the pleasure and the effectiveness of use. He's talking about pleasure, he's talking about effectiveness. He's essentially speaking about what became usability and human-centered design. This interaction element, this ability to use a product. So that part there, from if you look at it from a behavioral perspective, it's hard to use because the snout and the handle are both like you can't really pour with that part. So it's a mythical part. It's a design fiction created by Norman to demonstrate the problem of bad interaction. And that's the behavioral dimension. It's a beautiful looking pot. You can even have some reflective thoughts about it, but it's not really easy to interact with, right? It doesn't drive your behavior. So he created the term behavioral design. Simultaneously, behavioral economics came along. We'll get into the history of behavioral economics in class 2. And as a result, we had this thing called behavioral design today. But actually, we don't just borrow from behavioral economics. We don't just borrow from cognitive psychology like Norman. We also borrow from cyberneticians and media theory, guys like Marshall McLuhan, who famously said, first we shape our tools, thereafter they shape us. And I read that, I had to sit down, like, wow. This whole idea that basically the stuff that we make and the way we interact with them, it comes back to shape who we are. It's sort of this feedback loop, continuously reinforcing loop. And so while Norman was talking about, when he said behavioral design, he was talking about the design of the product. What we are talking about is designing behavior. We're looking at the world this way. So behavioral design, yes, an object has behavioral design. It has the element of that. Behavioral economics, very good. Behavioral economists can do some design. But we are designers of behavior. Behavior is our medium. And behavior is not something that's in a product, it's in people's actions. It's that. And so behavior design is the design of action. So it's just a distinction in the industry that not many people are aware of, but guys like BJ Fogg, for example, there are interesting guys like this dude who writes about platforms, Sangeet Chowdhury, he's the leading platform expert. He refers to the field as behavior design. And I think as people who want to get deep into this field, I think it's super important that we understand this distinction. And a few more slides before you can jump to questions. But if you think about the history of design, this famous quote from Eslinger, founder of Frog Design, who said, design is not a noun, it's a verb. It is not it's not a noun. It's something, it signifies action, right? And when you say behavioral design, the reason that word becomes behavioral is because you're using design as a noun. You're using it as a static quality of an object. But if you're talking about the act of designing, which is verb, then you just use behavior. And that's where the distinction comes. So there's two etymological or like terminology reasons for calling it behavior design. That's why I call it behavior design. So it's kind of a clever thing to know, this whole thing. But I also think it makes a subtle shift in your mind about what is it we actually do, what's our final goal, what is our medium, and stuff like that. In fact, if you look at what William Gibson said, famous science fiction writer, in one of his interviews, which are all just fantastic, he said, the first time I heard the word interface used as a verb, I fairly swooned, right? To use the word interface, not as a thing, but I'm interfacing with you as an action, just like the word design. So we like to stay with the verb form of things. Yeah. Any questions on that? Any thoughts,
Not a question,
questions?
but yeah, just a thought how, like, if you look around today, basically everything around us is just designed by somebody. Like I can look around my room and somebody put it all together. Like I can look around my street and there's like everything literally put into place by somebody. And you think about that, it sort of becomes very clear that, well, shit, like if you're a designer, you have a bit of a responsibility out there to do something really good for other people, because people will inevitably interact with all of that stuff. Like be it a digital product, a physical product, or whatever, how it's called, environmental kind of, when you create landscape design, I don't know,
yes,
part of architecture. Anyway, that kind of stuff. Yeah, really inspiring.
Excellent.
Yeah, I really like that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jamie.
Just building on what you said, Sia, I think that is a really good observation. Everything, and the, I guess, effect of design being everywhere, and I mean, us being surrounded by it, and it feels like this behavior design is just guess, a level deeper of like, we all want to design, great experiences and, like have these things enjoyable, and then kind of go deeper. And it's like, okay, well, is it visceral? Is it reflective? Is it behavioral? Where, and tying these things together, it's just like a deeper reflection of what's going on.
I also had a bit of a reflection on that. I watched the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma.
Jamie was just talking about it.
I was thinking
Yes.
this is about the importance of the behavior design, because from that documentary it seemed like it was something very unconscious to them. They had not thought about behavior when they were designing, and then now it's a big problem. So I think that the field of behavior design is super important and even growing, right?
Yes, I think so. I love how Tom is sitting there in this absolute philosopher pose. The Rodin's thinking man, for sure. I love it. That's the idea. So it's only 2 hours class, guys, so I'm going to chug on, but we'll pause again for questions. Now we get into the real meat. You got some idea of like the terminology difference. And just to be clear, I don't care if you use behavioral design, behavior design, and in the same conversation in the industry, you have people using both, but just so you understand the distinction between that small 2 letters, there can be so much difference in what someone's saying or where they come from to the subject. Oh, hello there. Yes, perfect timing. Oh no, I hope you don't disconnect the computer.
Is he also paying for the course? Or is it free passage?
For Watson, it's just free. Oh. He's like a little panther. It's super cool. I just don't want to destroy my charger. It's a little funky. All right. Hey, great. Gonna jump into what I'm calling the behavior design lens, guys. This is the heavy stuff. And I know Philippe is a great gatekeeper for me in terms of jumping into complexity. I think I love how in brainstorming sessions, he has a way of just bringing the complexity level down by saying something really nice and calm with a smile while everyone's bouncing around. I've noticed that in our brainstorm. So, but I think all of you here have a great like bullshit filter as well. But this is where the class gets a bit heavy and I'm gonna go for it. Hang tight with me. And we still have 1 hour, so it's perfect on time. So what I'm doing is essentially, I thought I'd give you guys, I was thinking like, what metaphor could I find? And a sort of a toolkit inside your mind, which you could use to understand when you understand what's happening when you look at different things, different pieces of information, projects, interventions out there in the world. Came up with this behavior design lens set. So we're going to talk about 5 ways of seeing this field of behavior. And sometimes there might be overlaps and sometimes you might just be looking through one lens, but just going to look at 5 different perspectives, if you will. And each of them I'm calling one lens, and I'm using the metaphor, using the visual of a lens there. And we'll go through the lenses now. The first one is the behavioral economics lens, right? And this lens is like hugely important to us in this field. It's not the only one. A lot of people do not know who work in behavior design. They don't know anything besides this one lens. They just see the entire profession through this. Most companies that talk about nudging, behavioral economics, stuff like that, they usually see the world through this one lens, the behavioral economic lens. And for us, let's take an icon to represent that lens for us. And for us, it's the discount tag. There's a reason for that. It may not be the perfect icon, but it's an icon I present to you. We can always change it up later. Some of the key thinkers in behavioral economics, the key people behind behavior design also as a field, its emergence, at least right now, most of you guys have heard a lot about. We've known many of these guys, probably Dilip Soman, who's written The Last Mile, based in Canada, Indian dude. He's doing some excellent work on educating on experimentation. I think we'll be borrowing from The Last Mile also in this quite much in this course as much as possible. Dan Ariely is just very, very accessible to understand. And he is actually working a lot in industry, in areas like finance and stuff. So he's a real nudge designer. And if you follow him, follow his work, you'll understand, you'll see a lot of practical applications. On the very other extreme, you have Kahneman, who's very much a theorist. I mean, he started this whole thing ages ago. Basically, when Kahneman started this whole thing, there wasn't the word called nudge. He's that old. He came up with the fundamental rules which led to what Taylor, who's next, created. And we'll get into the history of nudging in the next class. Essentially, Kahneman comes up with these, he's a psychologist. He comes up with these ideas with his partner, Tversky. All that research drives what Taylor and guys came up with. In economics, they are economists as nudge, and then Kahneman gets a Nobel in economics because there still isn't a Nobel in psychology. That's unfucking believable, by the way. So we need to send email to Sweden. Anyway, these key thinkers, these are the big names to recognize, but in each of these lenses, there's plenty of them. I've just put some of the really big names up there. And we will visit a lot of these guys in class as we go through. Now, when you look at anything through the behavioral economics lens, you see some of these ideas which keep coming up. Ideas like nudge, biases, value, choice. You see, it's an economics perspective. So they're always interested in things like utility. How do you make decisions around purchasing or pricing or money or saving? And how can you be nudged? So the whole nudge thing comes out of that background. And now we are applying nudge to all kinds of areas, but it came out of economics, basically. How do you frame options? If you say this is more than that, or that is more than this, will you pick one or the other, right? Heuristics, what they are, we'll get into it later, rules of thumb. UX designers know heuristics a little bit, but market and things like trust, currency. So it's a very economics lens, so to speak, this one. And the big one here actually is decision-making, because what all of these guys are trying to understand in the very end is how we decide, what makes us decide. But as behavior designers, we care about more than just decision-making, as I already showed you. We also care about action. And that's why we go beyond behavioral economics. While behavioral economists can tell us, and guys like, even guys like Ariely, who works with, as a practitioner, they're not designers the way we are designers. We actually get to the interface and we look at like colors and like size and distance to click and refresh rate and all of that stuff. These guys don't do that. These guys can help you figure out what are the criteria for decision making, and they can bring a lot of good stuff there, right? So that's the key. But we'll get a lot more into behavioral economics throughout the course. This is the one part I don't want to spend too much time on now. So we move to the next one. Let's watch a video. It's pretty interesting. Patrick Haggard. I'll unfortunately have to unshare and share again, this time with the video enabled. So Zoom needs to do something there with that. Oh, I'm getting the hang of this, guys.
Thanks. I'm going to be talking about decisions and how our brain transforms them into actions. So a decision is a state of mind which is aiming to produce a particular action. So let's have a look at this goalkeeper. He's got to decide with very little time and very little evidence, maybe no evidence, and he's got to make an action to dive to the left or to dive to the right. And actually, sometimes he should inhibit making any action at all and stay in the middle, because sometimes that works as well. And that's going to be important at the end of my talk. So what I want to do is just think about decisions and actions. And we should remember that decision theory, classical decision theory, has been obsessed with whether our decisions are rational or irrational. But whichever one of those they are, we still have to transform them into actions. And I'm going to think about how the brain bridges decision to action. And I just want to try and say three things about that bridge. So the first thing that I would like to say is that we can't really trust our subjective experience of our own decisions. The way we think we decide is radically different from the way the brain actually decides for us. So here's a modified version of an experiment that was done recently in Sweden, which makes this point rather nicely. The experiment's very simple. The experimenter shows two pictures of two different cars to the participant in the experiment. And the participant simply has to choose to decide which car they prefer. And they indicate that by pointing towards one of the cars. The experimenter then takes both of the pictures away and then represents the car that the person had chosen and asks them to explain their decision. Now, I'll just back up a little bit. Look at those two cars. You choose which one you want. And then you have to explain your decision. But the experimenter is a magician, and you may have noticed he's actually swapped the two cars because he has a picture of the other car, which you didn't choose, hiding in the sleeve of his jacket, so that the participant is now asked to explain why they chose the car that in fact is not the one they chose at all, but the other one. Now, the interesting point is that actually most people don't even notice that the cars have been changed. This is because all cars look the same, even the ones outside today. But moreover, the people in this experiment were very, very happy to give lots of reasons why they had chosen the car, which in fact was not the car they chose at all. So they talked about the color or the shape and why they liked it. But really, that was just a confabulation. They were retrospectively inventing an experience of their own decision, which was clearly not what their brain had originally done. So we can't trust the way we think about our own decisions. The second point that I'd like to make about the bridge between decision and action is that in our culture, we think we're free. We think that we freely decide, that somehow there's an I somewhere in my brain which is making the decisions. And it's because that I decide freely what I do that I can control my actions, influence the world around me, and become responsible. But that's not quite right either. And I'm going to show you a simple experiment that we've done recently, which looks at this relation between free decision and the sense of control and responsibility.
Right. So it doesn't matter what that experiment is, but you get the point. What the neuroscientists are doing is that they're studying, decision making at the neuroscience level. They're trying to run these experiments, which typically tap into your subliminal states, and you get all kinds of interesting results about what people do or didn't do. And clearly there is, there is a lot of evidence that, just going to change this. Yeah, there is a lot of evidence that that neuroscience has a lot of important things to tell us about how we behave and why we behave the way we behave, right? So that's another lens, which is not so much, it's not looking at things like consciousness or choice or utility or decision-making. It's actually looking at things that are happening in your subliminal state below your level of consciousness, which actually drive behavior. That's another lens. Now, guys may have heard of Oliver Sacks. He's a fantastic science writer, neuroscientist, great neuroscience thinker if you want to read about, just had general essays and stuff. Ramachandran developed phantom limb. I just threw up a few big names here. Marianne Diamond. I mean, it's pretty hard to find more women or trans people or other, like diverse people in this field. It's super male dominated. At least like that's what I realized from preparing this course. That man, this women are definitely super underrepresented. But Marianne Diamond is one of them who actually demonstrated neuroplasticity, which is a key concept in neuroscience. I'm sorry. She demonstrated it first ever in a lab. This guy, Robert Sapolsky, is like the dude. I mean, not only is he super entertaining and fun to listen to, but his book, Behave, if you want to get into neuroscience, you want to buy one book, that's the book. And I don't mean get into it as a professional. We are all, like I said, we are all behavior designers. I'm not asking you to become neuroscientists, but this book is totally written for non-professionals. And it's a tome. I mean, it's a ton of pages. And he tries to just dissect what happens seconds to minutes, minutes to hours, hours to days, days to months, and centuries to millennia before a behavior occurs. So he takes you back in time. He starts with a behavior and he says, a second before this happens, a month before this happens, a year before this happens. And he breaks it down in terms of neurochemicals and your body, and it's a trip. Very beautifully written. So if you look at the, sorry.
We see some gray box, like we're not able to actually see all the slides because there's some like gray
I'm
box.
sorry, I'll stop sharing and start sharing again. I'm wondering if it's this stupid thing. Yeah, let's try again. Yeah, the usability of Zoom, even though it's really well done, wow, can improve. How about now,
Ashwin,
Ines?
you still have the same problem with the stripe.
I see. Aha, I have closed every other window except what is
Do you see it
necessary.
yourself, Ashwin?
I do not. Nope. Actually, it was funny. Ines, I think I'll stop recording now because this may have something to do with it.
It looks like that. I sent the